Hello and welcome back. In this video, I want to talk about projection. In my opinion, a good way to put projection is in two ways, to be honest. One is being upset by things that other people are doing, and the reason you're upset about it is because it's something you do, or you even misconstrue what they're doing to be something that you think you understand. But in reality, it's something that you do and you're misinterpreting what they're doing as being the same thing. Another way of projecting is you get with somebody and you project your ideal partner onto them. You expect them to uphold an ideal, which is obviously not good and also impossible. In the rare cases where people do uphold this projection, they're stretched really thin and drained. I kind of explained projection in a simpleton way, to be honest. It wasn't the greatest, but I think I got the point across. First, I'd like to cover a more general sense of projection and its effects, and then dive more into my personal experience and perspective on it. Sometimes we run into people that make us upset and we don't even know why. Or maybe we feel like we do know why, but at the same time, we have this underlying feeling that our level of anger or frustration towards this person is out of proportion to what they're doing or what they did. I think when we get this feeling of disproportion in our reaction to people's behaviors or attitudes, it's important to reflect on ourselves and be truthful when we ask ourselves, are we upset because they have the same weakness as us? And seeing somebody else do that upsets us, whether that's for a positive reason, as in you want the best for the people you talk to, or a negative reason, which is just staying unaware of the fact that it's something you do, or choosing to lie to yourself and say that it's not the same, even though it is. Whatever the reason. I think one of the big fears that people have in admitting that their disproportionate anger or frustration towards these people, if we were to speak about it from a Jungian perspective, the things that you find upsetting in other people are things that you find upsetting about yourself. Well, first of all, I think we have the perspective that the person is lower than us to begin with. I think as a foundational thought, you just think that person's lower than you. And so if you were to admit to having a similar problem or the same problem as them, you stoop to their level. And God forbid that happens, right? That would be awful if that's your way of thinking. And so, off topic, the first step would be to realize that we are all on the same level, just struggling from different places. It's important to understand that there are many paths, or you could say strings, of progression. And just because you're ahead of somebody else in one way doesn't mean you're ahead of them in many ways, or most ways. To see yourself completely ahead of somebody else just because you're better at one thing than they are is no good. It does no good for you. If anything, it isolates you and puts you in that mindset of feeling like you're misunderstood by everybody. But in reality, this quote-unquote misunderstanding is more so likely due to your own perspective. I would go as far to say that it's semi-delusional to believe that people should just understand what you're saying all the time, no matter what. But this is ignoring the whole foundational idea that you're above other people. So even though somebody may respond to you in a way that's actually fulfilling and normal, you won't see it as that simply because you projected strange that we go back to that word when all we're doing is talking about getting answers from people. You projected your idea of what the answer to your question should be, or what the answer to your behavior or attitude towards something should be, and they didn't fulfill that projection. A good way to imagine projection is a template. A template that's made out of a very strong material, and it's very specific. It's very specialized. I don't remember what they're called, but I feel like you'll know what I'm talking about. The plastic things with all the little shapes and letters in it that you use to sketch out shapes and letters. Now, those sheets have a lot of different shapes and stuff on them. Very complex. Now imagine you had to fit into every single one of those, but in this case I'm talking about a person's standards or a projection that's been put on you by either a friend, partner, manager, whatever. It's near impossible. Well, it is impossible. In the rare times when you are able to hold up that facade and maintain their idea of what you should be doing and who you should be, it's incredibly tiring and it wears you down. The worst part about people who function or socially operate around their own projections is that they're unaware of it, or they're, I would almost say, pseudo aware of it, meaning kind of they are, but at the same time not aware of why it's bad or what it truly is, or how it's truly like affecting their perspective and their experience and how they feel and so on. Try to put yourself in that position of having an imaginary idea of what you expect from everybody that you meet, including partners or family, whatever. And then whenever people don't give you that imagined idea, you break down or you belittle them. Put in a straightforward way, that's toxic behavior, you know? Do what I want, act the way I want, or I don't like you at all. But to view things so simply all the time, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think it's good to understand the inner workings and where it's coming from as a way to manifest or grow patient with people. So your response to when these things happen isn't frustration or anger, but instead patience and understanding. This isn't to say that disrespect is okay and that you should accept it, because it's actually the complete opposite. I'm personally a very stubborn person when it comes to disrespect and such. It's the complete opposite. When you're able to identify and be patient with negative behavior, you're able to respond to it in a healthy manner. You have a healthy, thought out response that's good for everybody around you, including yourself and the problematic person. So let's kind of get a coherent explanation of projection here. So you meet somebody and it feels like as long as you do everything they want, as long as you fulfill all these standards, even the unspoken ones, they seem to be your best friend. But as soon as you make a mistake, you're the worst person in the world. That's a really good example of projection. That person has an idealized way of living and perceiving the world, and they expect you to align with it, no matter what, period. It doesn't matter what your life experiences are, whether you've been taught different, experienced different. You must align, or you're a failure. You failed in their eyes as a friend. If you have people like this in your life, first of all, understand it's not normal and it's not okay, and to get away from them, especially if it's something that you've brought up and their response is to be argumentative. You can't change people. Something I've learned growing up through my experiences and such. You can't change people. You can tell people everything you want, or a really simple modern way of putting it. You can't send somebody a Jordan Peterson video. You can't send somebody a Jordan Peterson video and expect them to just have some enlightening moment. Everything changes. The guys falls, and they understand the world around them, and they completely change it. It doesn't work like that. And so it's the exact same if you try speaking to them over and over again. Some people are just miserable, and they enjoy that misery because they don't know how else to operate. If you operated on misery your whole life, how do you operate outside of that? Well, to them, you don't. Or they don't. They don't operate. Everything would fall apart. And so you leave it. You let them figure themselves out, find their own way out of it. When they're ready, they'll find it. I think an important perspective to adopt in speaking about projection is to take note of its egotistic way of operating. The very idea of believing that the people around you should operate the exact same way you do is egotistic. Or you could say narcissistic. Do what I say, think what I think, or you are lower than me, you are less. I think this is a particularly interesting thought exercise, especially when it comes to modern politics or just politics in general and history. On this channel, I'm not going to talk about politics. I may bring it up from time to time and say a specific, like basically what I'm saying now, where a specific perspective is interesting if you take it or use the lens of these new perspectives on politics. But outside of that, no further. Just something to think about. Derive your own conclusion from. Anyway, in my late teens and early 20s, I projected a lot in every aspect, both towards my family, towards friends, but also towards my partner in whatever relationship I've been in. And it's really unfortunate, but at the same time, I'm very glad that I'm aware of it now. Many a times I would be in a relationship and I projected my ideal partner onto them, or based on what I knew about them, based on the surface level information I had about them, I projected an idea of what the rest of them would be like or should be like based on what I think. And when they didn't fulfill that, I would get upset. I would get frustrated with them in oftentimes really mean ways. And at the time, I was just completely oblivious, or you could say ignorant or arrogant to the fact that it's not normal to want somebody to uphold and maintain your image of what they should be. It sounds silly, but it's just the way it was at the time. In doing this, the relationship would slowly go downhill. It would be unfortunate because my partner would obey what I wanted, or at least try their hardest to do that. And when that happened, in turn, we would both just become more and more drained because two reasons. One being I'm with a partner who's not even, who they are. They're trying to fulfill an image that I've created. And they're obviously tired and drained because they're trying to fulfill this image. Imagine it like getting on a stage and just having to fulfill an act. But this time that act is for every day. Every day you wake up, every night as you're going to bed, 24/7. You just have to fulfill this role, and if you don't, then to your partner, you're ugly. Whether that's aesthetically or socially, romantically. That's a really awful way to live, both for myself at the time and my partners. In the moment, I was aware, but I wasn't, of the behavior that I was exhibiting. It's a strange experience, I guess, in the mind. of being aware but not, or being aware and pushing it away as something else, or even being aware but blaming them, blaming somebody else for the reason that you're behaving the way you are, or thinking the way you are. So how did I overcome it? Or how am I currently overcoming it? Socialize. I think a lot of people who project or operate off of projecting onto other people what they think that person projecting what they think that person should be doing, what they think everybody that they meet should be doing, how they should be acting, behaving. Like I said before, I think it all stems from the foundational thought that you are above these other people, or you are above people in general, for whatever reason. Everybody's reason, or plural reasons, for thinking that they're above everyone else is different, but to throw those reasons out the window. I do believe that there are people that aren't good. There are people that just aren't great people, and it's okay to see them in I think the best way to put it, to see them in an appropriate light. But at the same time, be sure to keep yourself in check and understand the reason you're seeing them the way they do. Because oftentimes, especially if you're somebody who's prone to projecting, we can dislike people simply because they aren't upholding our idea or our perspective of how life should be lived, and that's not fair. You give up a lot of important, fun, and fulfilling experiences by berating or dismissing people just because they don't live the way you do or see things the way you do. And I've learned this as of recent through talking to people and maintaining friendship with people that don't align with how I see the world. People that disagree with you serve as good equalizers to your world perspective, ways you may be thinking wrong. The idea of thinking wrong oftentimes is subjective, but subjectivity is extremely important if you're somebody who struggles with accepting yourself or accepting others and being happier in life in general. I think a lot of sheltered men nowadays have this perspective that being the smartest one in the room, or being the most developed or disciplined, in whichever way they see these things, is of utmost importance. And anybody who isn't the ideal whatever Andrew Tate follower, Joe Rogan follower or listener, Jordan Peterson educated, whatever other jargon, then they're a loser if they're not that. If they're not educated by all these resources. This isn't to say anything negative about these resources though, because I think oftentimes these people do have important and insightful things to say, or perspectives on the world. But a lot of times it's mixed in with things that are just terrible perspectives. Or in the case of more educated perspectives, the perspective may be the correct way to have it or the optimal way, but we don't always live optimally. And when you can't live optimally 24/7, that's completely fine. This idea that you need to be running at 100 at all times is, I think, completely created by, again, that foundation of I am above others because I abuse myself. And if other people aren't willing to abuse themselves and run on 110 at all times, then they are losers and they don't deserve to be in my presence. I'll make this brief, but this topic in a way reminds me of the NoFap perspective. I'm personally not a big supporter of NoFap. I'm not against it either. I don't really care what people are doing. But my perspective of it is that jerking off is not a problem. It's the reason you're jerking off, or the situations that you're jerking off in, that's the problem. This idea that if you just don't do it, period, ever, you'll just be enlightened. You'll just wake up on day 15, a completely new man, ready to take on the world, ready to make millions, work overtime, get a nice hot babe, and have kids. It's just not how it works. I think that's how a lot of people see it. It's deified. You gotta confront yourself, not jerking off. Of course, if you're jerking off, multiple times every day, instead of talking to people or whatever else, yeah, you've got a problem. But for those of us that don't do that, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Your problem with jerking off doesn't come from the fact that it exists. I think that's a really good resitting or changing of seats and view on it. Just think about that. The no fap idea is maintaining the perspective that the problem with jerking off is the very fact that it exists. It's strange. In a way, if you were to view that in some paradoxical philosophical perspective, like the idea of a bridge collapsing, the problem with the bridge collapsing is the very fact that it existed in the first place. Yeah, that's true, but to go into that perspective is just, it's stupid. It's a waste of time. It doesn't get you anywhere. What do they call it? Analysis paralysis. You just sit there and think about shit that nobody cares about. You can support other people and have a fulfilling social life while not fully agreeing with everyone around you. In fact, I think you have a more fulfilling life when you don't agree with absolutely everything that people say around you, especially if they don't live a similar lifestyle as you. Now, this perspective of saying it's okay if people have just different ways of living, so on and so forth, and surrounding yourself with people who have different ways of living and so on. This isn't to say that every single way of living is okay. I think sometimes people can take things literally. If there's some bum in your group, or there's a commonality between an activity and bums who exhibit certain bum behaviors. When I say bum behaviors, I'm not speaking about the stereotypical, like, old school bum, as in homeless person. What I mean by bum is people who don't have a skill, or who don't care to have a skill. They just kind of, go to work, come home, drink, go to bed, and their work is some, shitty day job. Now, the job itself, or the occupation that a person has, does not define who they are or whether or not they are a smart person or a bum. It's the habits they have. Money doesn't matter. Just because somebody has less money than you doesn't mean they're worth less than you, or that their perspective is not helpful. I don't think it has any effect at all. Again, I think we're all just equal. We're just in different positions on the plane of existence. The point I'm trying to make is there are people in the world that just aren't great to be around, and we all know those types of people. But to be mindful when you're removing those people, ensure that you're not removing them just because they challenge your perspective in a way that's healthy or could be very helpful to you and them. And to ensure that the reason you're removing them from your social circle isn't because some self-motivated perspective that's based on your own insecurities. I feel some parts of this were repetitive and or meandering in a way. So as a recap, projecting your idea of how people should operate, behave, and live, I believe stems from the core idea that you are above other people because of your own perspective. And if you want to fix the issue of projecting onto other people and having toxic relationships or friendships, or just to have more stable relationships with the people around you, you first have to confront and accept the idea that you think your perspective is better than others, or that you are above others. As always, thanks for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you in some way. I'll see you in the next one.